Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I manage a restaurant in a country where foreign workers make up a significant portion of the workforce. For context, every foreign worker needs sponsorship from either a company or individual employer to work here. My restaurant employs several expatriates as servers, kitchen staff, cleaners, and drivers. Last month, I was relaxing at home on a Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. The caller informed me that one of our sponsored employees, a server named Maria, had been detained for public indecency. She'd been caught in a compromising position with a man in a private booth at a local restaurant. The police had walked in on them engaged in what you might call excessive PDA. Though they were clothed, the man she was with, who worked at a neighboring restaurant, had exposed himself. After some stern warnings and threats about deportation, the police had them sign a formal warning document and release them. That evening, something started bothering me. Hold on, I thought to myself. How did the police know exactly where to find them? I called the restaurant the next morning. Has this kind of thing happened before? I asked the manager. Never, he replied. The police just walked in and went straight to that back booth. We hadn't even noticed anything unusual. This detail stuck with me. Someone must have tipped off the police, but who? I scheduled a meeting with Maria to discuss the incident and get her perspective. Maria, I need to understand what happened, I began. Do you have any idea who might have reported you? Without missing a beat, she responded, It must have been Alex, our driver. What makes you say that? He dropped me off at the restaurant. He probably saw James. That's the guy I was with. Follow me in. I knew Alex had driven her there. It was part of his job duties and her primary transportation option. That seems like an extreme reaction, I said. Why would he do something like that? Maria shifted uncomfortably in her seat. He's been pursuing me for months. He keeps trying to get me alone. About 6 weeks ago, She paused. He tried to force himself on me in the parking lot after my shift. I fought him off, and since then he's barely spoken to me except when necessary. Maria, why didn't you report this immediately? I asked, trying to keep my rising anger in check. I handled it myself, she said firmly. He backed off. I didn't want to cause trouble or get anyone fired. Plus, I really don't want to deal with the authorities here. When she declined to press charges, I felt my blood pressure rising, but I had another conversation to handle. I called Alex into my office later that day. You've heard about what happened with Maria this weekend? I asked casually. His face lit up with an unsettling pride. Heard about it? I'm the one who reported it. This was exactly what I needed. Over the years, Alex had frequently shown us photos of his wife back home, a younger, attractive woman who lived with his mother. He'd often mention how lucky he was to have such a beautiful wife, despite their inability to have children. He also made a point of presenting himself as deeply religious. Why did you call the police? I pressed. After dropping her off, I waited because I know she's troublesome, he said smugly. When I saw that married man follow her in, I called the police. It's against God's will. Interesting, I said, maintaining my composure. Why not report it to your supervisor or me? Why involve the police before even confirming what was happening? He stared at his shoes, suddenly silent. I know what you did to Maria, Alex. Your attempted assault. Your harassment. I only tried once, sir, he mumbled. Within hours, I had him fired and on a plane home. But I wasn't finished. I still had his home phone number from his original job application. After confirming his flight had departed, I made the call. His wife answered. Mrs. Alex, this is your husband's former employer. I wanted to inform you that I terminated his employment today. He's currently on flight number XXX, arriving at XXX time. You should know the reason for his termination was an attempted sexual assault on a coworker half his age. I'm sorry you had to learn about this. I hung up as I heard her shocked intake of breath. The next one is an entitled people's story. I inherited my grandfather's vineyard in Northern California back in 2019. It's a beautiful 15-acre property that's been in our family for 3 generations. My grandfather taught me everything about winemaking when I was growing up, and I always dreamed of continuing his legacy. The trouble started when my neighbor Tom decided to expand his auto repair business. Tom owned the property next to mine, where he ran a small mechanic shop. One day I came home from work to find construction crews on my land clearing space right in the middle of my vineyard. I immediately rushed over and confronted Tom, who was supervising the construction. What the hell are you doing on my property? I demanded. Tom just smiled smugly. Oh, didn't you get my notice? I'm expanding my business. Need more space for my workshop. This is my land. You can't just build here. Actually, I can. This part of the property belongs to me. Check the county records. I was stunned. I knew for a fact that this land was mine. I had all the deed documents from when I inherited it. But Tom insisted he had paperwork proving he owned this section of the vineyard. I called the police, but they said it was a civil matter since Tom claimed he had legitimate ownership. They couldn't do anything without a court order. Meanwhile, the construction continued, and I watched helplessly as they ripped out dozens of my grandfather's grapevines to make room for Tom's workshop. I immediately contacted a real estate attorney. When we looked into it, we discovered Tom had filed some sketchy paperwork with the county claiming there was an error in the property lines. He had somehow convinced a junior clerk to update the records without proper verification. My lawyer said this was straight-up fraud. We filed for an emergency injunction to stop construction, but Tom's crew worked through the weekend to get the basic structure up before we could get in front of a judge. By Monday, there was a massive 5,000-square-foot metal building sitting in the middle of my vineyard. The court battle that followed was intense. Tom hired some hotshot lawyer who tried to argue that the property line adjustment was legitimate, but my attorney systematically demolished their case. We had surveys going back 50 years showing the true boundaries. We had testimony from the previous owners. We even had satellite images showing how Tom had deliberately built over the clearly marked property line. The most damning evidence came from the county clerk who had processed Tom's paperwork. She admitted under oath that Tom had pressured her to push through the documents without proper review, implying he had connections in local government who could cause trouble for her if she didn't cooperate. The judge was furious. Not only did he rule in my favor, but he ordered Tom to remove the building entirely at his own expense and pay damages for my destroyed grapevines. The total came to over $200,000. Tom tried to appeal, but the higher court upheld the ruling. He begged me to let him keep the building if he paid rent, but I refused. Those vines were my grandfather's legacy, and I wanted them replanted. The demolition day was incredibly satisfying. I watched as crews tore down that eyesore of a building piece by piece. Tom had to stand there and watch too, per court order, to ensure he didn't interfere with the demolition. It took almost 2 years, but I finally got my vineyard back. I've replanted the damaged section with new vines. They'll take time to mature, but eventually they'll produce grapes just like my grandfather's original plants did. Tom still glares at me whenever he sees me, but he doesn't dare try anything now. The judge made it very clear that any further attempts to encroach on my property would result in criminal charges. I had a professional surveyor install permanent boundary markers and put up security cameras just to be safe. The whole experience cost me a lot of time and stress, but watching that illegal workshop come down made it all worthwhile. Sometimes you have to stand your ground and fight for what's rightfully yours, no matter how long it takes. The best part? The first vintage from my replanted vines will be ready next year. I'm going to name it Justice Served, my little way of commemorating this victory over a neighbor who thought he could steal my grandfather's legacy. The next one is a petty revenge story. I live in a townhome community, and people not picking up their dog's poop is a big problem. Constant poop everywhere, even though there are bag supply stations in many locations. Today I thought I heard someone at my door and decided to look down from the second-story window, but didn't see anyone at my door. However, I saw the neighbor walking their Dalmatian. I saw the dog pooping, and I decided to keep looking out the window to see if this woman would pick up her dog's poop. You guessed it, she did not. I thought about yelling out the window asking if she was going to pick it up, but thought I'd give her the benefit of the doubt and she'd come back out and pick it up. I've done that before upon realizing I didn't bring a bag and went back out to grab it, but she did not. I let the poop sit there for an hour or two to see if anyone in her family would go pick it up, and now such luck. So I went out and bagged the poop up and tossed it onto their doorstep. They have a Ring camera and probably saw me do it, so maybe just maybe they'll pick it up next time. However, I doubt it. Not the best petty revenge, but it felt good to toss it at their door. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I am an administrator for an institution that works in the public sector. The hierarchy of this structure is slightly complicated because of the nature of the job, criminal justice. I oversee around 20 employees. Those employees are supervised by 4 individuals with rank for 4 different shifts. Each supervisor has another ranked, lesser, person to assist them, so basically each shift has a primary and secondary supervisor. They all report to one individual who ranks beneath me, and I oversee all of them. I report to the individual in charge of the whole institution, and that person reports to an elected official who manages the entire department. The tricky part is, the department has 2 divisions, and while this elected official oversees all of it, they really only run the other division. We have an employee who is very intelligent, however, his book smart is vast, and his actual experience in this line of work is minimal. He is a ranked assistant on one shift, so he works with the supervisor of one shift. He sends weekly emails complaining about all the other shifts and their mess-ups. He will write down everything from someone forgetting to remove trash, to someone making an error on a form, or even someone interpreting a directive differently than him. He makes it clear that his way is the correct way, and anyone not doing things his way should be written up. He shouts accountability constantly or sends condescending emails after a directive is put in place, usually because someone messed up, and advises me to, "You need to speak directly with the individual that caused this change, otherwise they won't have a clue it's because of them." Basically telling me and the head administrator how we should be doing our jobs. He targets employees and complains about them demanding demotion and accountability, and badmouths us for doing nothing about poor performance. Meanwhile, I have submitted multiple demotion requests and write-ups to HR for accountability, but the union steps in and dismisses many of them. This individual does not know or see any of this because personnel issues are not open discussions, and it really isn't his business what discipline is put in place, but it's being done. He just does not see it or hear about it to protect the privacy of that employee. Recently, he has started attacking a shift supervisor on the opposite shift. Anytime something is off, he sends an email with her opus accusations to that supervisor, all of which turn out to not even be true or from that shift to begin with. He ranted about how he never sees the administrators, and in order to run a good facility, administrators need to be visible and involved on every shift, even citing it's not that hard to come in late and stay late to speak to your employees, basically telling us how we should be doing our jobs. He wants monthly supervisor meetings instead of quarterly because this will eliminate misunderstandings of directives that the other shifts are doing wrong. Little does he know we had monthly meetings for a long time and no one was able to make them, and nothing came of the meetings, so they requested quarterly meetings. I agree that visibility is important, and I stop in twice a month with night shift to check in and see day shift every day, but he never gets up to come speak to me during my rounds. He sits and reads or plays on his phone, which is allowed due to the nature of the job. He commented, "I can't recall the last time I saw any of you demanding that admins come in more to micromanage better. I was in a week prior, so that kinda upset me as he won't acknowledge me. So I started coming in more and told him, why are you sitting? You should be managing. There are things to be cleaned and sorted. You can count inventory of supplies. We don't pay you to sit around." This upset him because we do pay them to sit around until needed, if they have an intake. I then asked him why he was sitting in a restricted area. He stated it was quiet in there and common sense shows he's not violating the rule because he didn't go past a specific point so he can sit there. It's a corridor leading to another part of the building not owned by us. I read him the directive which states, "At no point should anyone for any reason go beyond this door unless in an emergency evacuation situation." I asked him again what was so difficult to understand about this request. He still found nothing wrong with going past the door to sit on the other side. I told him he has demanded accountability, so he would be getting a write-up for not following the directive. He flipped out saying it was such a minor thing and reminded him of all the little minor things he complains about with the other shifts. I continued to come in and micromanage everyone. A few employees asked why I was there all the time because we hired supervisors to manage the shifts, so did we not think they were capable of doing the job? I advised that some people felt that they couldn't manage the shift and wanted administrators to come in more. The complaining individual got several more write-ups, one major one for an almost fire-able offense, showing that maybe in fact he didn't have all the answers. He sent an email to my supervisor complaining that I was micromanaging and being extremely anal with the minor write-up infractions that he now says aren't that big to even be reprimanded for. My supervisor asked, "But this is what you wanted, is it not? You complained that you wanted us to be seen and manage more and hold people accountable when they mess up. The complaining individual wanted other people written up but not himself because he was never wrong, or that's what he implied." I went back to my regular twice-a-month check-in, which is just stopping in to see how things are going on the shift. The complainer has been quiet for now, sitting inside the allowable room reading. His superiority complex will be his downfall. I remind him that the newest employees are the ones we can learn the most from, and he needs to value knowledge he can get from anyone, regardless of their experience or rank status. I'm an administrator, and I tell staff I am always learning and will continue to learn from everyone. The next one is an entitled people's story, first time posting. I've heard a few of these stories in audio readings and figured I'd share my meager story. Now, this happened a few years back. somewhere between 2012 and 2020, so my memories on this event will be vague at best, so bear with me. I was either in my late teens or early 20s, and I'm in my 30s now. I did a long stint during this time with a local community theater. It was super informal. While there were a few people with real theatrical experience or aspirations, it was generally a place where just anyone off the street interested in live theater could go to experience it either as an actor or audience. We also had a youth theater, and there was usually younger folks around as well. While we didn't have a true official customer, one woman pretty filled the role of unofficial official costumer, and naturally we will refer to her as Karen. Typically, Karen could be nice and helpful enough. However, she was a bit arrogant. She'd constantly go on about her 30 years experience and whatnot. For example, as we were working on a Ghost of Christmas Future costume for me, she mentioned something about putting me in a doublet. I realized from her phrasing she thought a doublet was some kind of pants garment, like pantaloons. As an avid Shakespeare nerd at the time, I knew a doublet was more like a jacket, and I stated as such. She got this smug, snooty attitude about it, convinced I didn't know what I was talking about, musing, he's actually going to try and prove me wrong on this, in a condescending tone. Extrapolate that attitude to her other interactions, and I think you know the kind of woman she is. For anyone curious, a simple Google search should answer any questions you have regarding doublets. For the story in question, we were in a dress rehearsal for a play. Obviously, we need our costumes, so a bunch of us, and the director-owner of the building, we'll call him Mitch, show up early to set up only to find the dressing rooms locked. The problem is, this is an older building and the dressing rooms don't have conventional locks. They can lock from inside, but on the outside was only a single narrow hole that you could only fit a thin prod through. We were at a bit of a loss and spent several minutes trying to jimmy the doors open with things like credit cards. Ultimately, we got them open, and the general assumption was that one of the children locked them, not realizing they couldn't be unlocked easily from the outside. So I took upon myself to put up signs not to lock the doors. I wrote, "Do not lock dressing room doors," with triple underlines. The intention behind my formatting was emphasis and grabbing attention. Maybe that was ignorant of me, I don't know, but we just thought it was a child's mistake, and I simply wanted to help avoid further confusion. Turns out, it was actually Karen who locked the doors, and she was not happy about my signs. She came upstairs to the stage while I was rehearsing a scene, and tells me to speak with her in the front office. I follow, and as soon as we're alone, she starts lighting into me about the signs, ranting at me about how disrespected she felt, and she's been doing this for 30 years, etc., and I'm just dumbfounded. If I recall correctly, she really keyed in on the number of exclamation points and underlines. I barely remember saying anything through her tirade, from a combination of not getting a word in through her verbal assault and just being confused that she was this tilted. I wasn't even upset at her rant, just befuddled and astonished. Finally, Mitch starts wondering what the hell is going on and comes in. After she explains why she's yelling at me, this sets him off in turn at her. Now he's yelling at her, dressing her down both for locking the doors and yelling at me for putting up signs, which he okayed. I just sat down at this point and zoned out as I waited for the storm to pass. Eventually, I'm pretty sure she apologized to me, but honestly, apologies like that mean little to me because you shouldn't be treating people like that in the first place, especially when you have 30 years experience and are old enough to know better. Not the most climactic story, but it's what I got. I have a few others from during my time at the theater, but this was the one that stuck out most in my memory. The next one is an entitled parent's story. Hey, so I'm here to talk about an extremely entitled mother. She has a ton of kids, all different baby daddies, and just lets them run wild. She doesn't care to watch them or keep them safe. One instance, she let her child run free all over a park, in an area where the kids don't normally play, way away from the playground, where generally sketchy individuals hang out. They had a dog there, and her kid kept duck in with it. They asked her to politely get her kid, but she refused, and her child got bit. Even the police officer wouldn't let her press charges because of her negligence on her own part. She then makes it worse by posting about her super tragic incident, blaming the homeless people for not having their dog on a leash, when in fact they were not even homeless, and they had their dog contained. Everyone went all to protecting her because of her post villainized a group of people deemed to be a lower class than her, even though she was the one not paying attention to her crotch goblin. The child's skin wasn't even punctured, she just used her platform to whine about the homeless and how she can't even take her kids to the park. A little while later, she posted pictures of her child who is drawn all over their dog. Clearly it shows that she has not been watched for a really long time. Someone made a post about asking opinions if it's okay to let kids draw all over dogs or not because of the danger that if a dog doesn't like it, they could snap, or even the toxicity of some markers was commented on. I don't know why parents like this exist, or pet owners to that matter, but it makes me really sad to see a poor child getting hurt because of their own mother's negligence. I was going to add some photos of the recent post so you could see how the mother is defending her actions on allowing her child to color all over her dog, including in her dog's face, eyes, and nose, but it won't allow me. I can link the post in the comments. She went and made her own post about how it's okay for her kid to color on her dog, and all her friends are obviously sticking up for her, furthering her delusions. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.